Welcome to episode 215 of Empty the Bench of the Empty the Bench podcast network. He's Tom Albano. I'm Nick Morgasen. Follow us on social media at ETB Sports, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at ETB Sports. Follow us on the Empty the Bench podcast network at ETB Network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETB Network. Make sure you follow our website, etbpodcast.com, for all the latest and information for everything that is going on at the network. Also, if you want to listen to us audio only, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on a bunch of other platforms as well. Well, second show of the year for 2024, and it seems like the news has never changed.
No, it's same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. As the days go by, I'm not going to go into singing all that because I don't want the YouTube copyright machine to come after me.
We don't. I see you, Zep. Okay.
Zappy. Zappy. But you know what? We haven't heard about him yet as of the time we started recording this. But we have heard about other coaches that have been quite the shocks.
Yeah, so obviously NFL Black Monday has come and passed a lot, and I would say a lot more than usual in the firing space.
I would say at least in terms of the drama. So we'll talk about it, but Pete Carroll's not going to be back. Might be moving to the front office. The Seahawks potentially looking at Cowboys defensive coordinator, former Falcons head coach Dan Quinn as the next replacement. Mike Vrabel is out in Tennessee. Ron Rivera, as we kind of expected, out in Washington. But Washington making a hiring in its executive department. That's quite the stir. The New York Giants in the news because Wink Martindale has managed to walk out on the team.
That story is nuts, and it's kind of apropos for New York football, both sides of New York football. Speaking of yelling and screaming, the Pat McAfee Jimmy Kimmel saga takes a new ride, and it gets worse.
A couple of rides. One path with Kimmel and Rodgers, another path with ESPN itself.
And not Broncos country, let's ride, but there's definitely a ride involved here. Also, obviously, the national championship, Michigan wins. Everyone is upset because Michigan is a cheater, but Jim Harbaugh wins. Now he's the most sought-out head coach for the NFL. Hires Don Yee, I think, who's the NFL agent, like in all the circles. He did a post-game interview after the game, like basically saying, "I'm going to be here next spring." BS. I don't believe that for a minute.
I don't know. All I know is, at the very least, you can say what you want about Michigan. I am kind of glad to at least see Jim Harbaugh finally win a championship after all these years. And obviously, college football, if you want to talk about cheating, that's a weird road to go down. Then there is some other news to really talk about. Supposedly, the Jets the other team, speaking of New York football, are trying to trade Zach Wilson this coming off season. I guess they think that he's done.
Okay. Yeah, because we already have a weird enough quarterback situation. Let's try and get a bucket of footballs for Zach Wilson instead.
Draymond Green is back.
Yeah, Draymond Green somehow gets reinstated after a 12-game suspension for apparently it being a right to smack people in the head or punch people in the head.
And then teasing that he's going to retire. Saying that...
on his podcast.
Saying that he was telling Adam Silver that he was done and he was going to hang it up, and that Silver basically had to talk him out of retirement.
Yeah, okay. You just signed a 4-year, $100 million deal. You're not retiring. Also, I laugh in the face of a certain NBA star. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. But I think there's a bigger story at hand here that we have to discuss, which changed our rundown for, I think, the 5th time in the last 48 hours. And it's a college coach change. Well, in this case, a retirement. Not in the NFL, in college. The one and only Nick Saban is done.
Shock.
70-something years old, after all this time, after Alabama surged and managed to get the number 4 spot in the college football playoff. Number of championships with Alabama over the last decade or so. And all of a sudden, just he's done.
You didn't know that was part of the script, kicking FSU out, knowing that Alabama would be number 4 and he could retire when it was over. The ESPN script writers had that in their back pocket.
But it's funny that you say that because I know there were rumors that his retirement was kind of impending.
Looming.
I just didn't think it was going to be this season. I thought he would have gone 1 or 2 more, especially the way that, they came so close and then just the play calling in that overtime against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. I just thought he was going to try and go at it 1 or 2 more times before calling a career. I didn't think that this is how it was going to end.
What's incredible, though, is he had a run. So he's won 7 national titles, 1 with LSU, 6 with Alabama. He's coached a lot of legendary players. He kind of reminds me of Belichick with the Patriots and the NFL level. Like an incredible career that you're not going to be able to beat whatsoever.
And we already talked about that. We don't even know what Belichick's decision is out of the time.
Oh, don't you worry. We'll have plenty of time to speculate on Mr. Hoodie and what his whole situation is going to be. No, but Nick Saban, incredible career, even coached the Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
I think he was the head coach.
It wasn't
miserably.
I was going to say, he's one of those college coaches where it wasn't exactly a great tenure.
It didn't transform well to the NFL.
Right. But you know what? I can't necessarily put all the fault on him because we have seen a number of college coaches try and fall on their face, point flat, fail miserably in the NFL level. I think of him. I think of Chip Kelly, for instance, as well.
I forgot who the most recent one was that came to the NFL level and went back to Oregon. I think it was the coach who went to Oregon.
But what's his face who tried the Jacksonville gig for a season from Ohio State? Oh, Urban Meyer.
Urban Meyer. Well, Urban Meyer was a head case. That he lost his job because he was hanging out in nightclubs. But no, Nick Saban, legendary career. He will. I'm guaranteeing you, he will have a statue someday outside Alabama Stadium. Like I said, 7 titles, 1 with LSU, 6 with Alabama, and he was a respected coach. That's the big thing. Like, was he conventional by any means? No, he was unconventional. Same thing with Belichick. Belichick was unconventional, but people respect the name Saban. They respect the name Belichick in every way, shape, or form. They're going to listen.
Because, for all that you want to say about Nick Saban and being tired of Alabama or any sort of controversy or all too, SEC powerful. But you mentioned like Belichick, we talk about all of Belichick and the Patriots controversies. But at the end of the day, just like Belichick and the Patriots, Nick Saban in Alabama is a dynasty, and a dynasty that is to be sort of respected in a way, especially when you mention 6 national championships, just all the success that Saban has had in the last decade with the Crimson Tide. There is something magical to be said about that this is a run that, very few, if any, can kind of duplicate.
He won 3 out of 4, if I'm not mistaken. 2009, 2011, and 2012. So 3 out of 4.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the last 15 years plus over a decade.
Right. And national championships, in my opinion, are a lot harder to win sometimes than the Super Bowl. Because
especially
you have to put the right team together, the right class.
Right. Well, you have to have the right team. You have to have the class. So the recruiting that you have to have the right kind of schedule, because we all know how those college committees love their schedule strength rating and their ratings of victories and defeats.
My favorite is when they pay that dinky school that has no business being on their schedule whatsoever just so they could have a win.
And then you got to hope that the committee calls on you to be, think of all the college football programs in the nation, and only 4 get to go to the college football playoff. You
I
gotta hope you're
think they
1
would have
for 4.
won less if this whole rule was in place years before. Because I don't know, because their schedules were somewhat easy when they were playing that good. Well, to them it was easy, but
Yeah, maybe. And then of course being in the SEC helps.
well, yeah, obviously because you have SEC bias, which I know people are going to say, well, FSU wouldn't have won anything. Well, first of all, that's not up to you to say what FSU is going to do.
Like
And people got, yeah.
I obviously we say fallacy of a predetermined outcome. I kind of agree with those people considering FSU was kind of damaged and the damage that Georgia did to them. I think was that in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah. It was a consolation game. It was the third
Yeah.
place game.
It was the 5 and the 6 basically going at it, and yeah, Georgia just kind of wiped the floor with them. But I mean, just think of the historic nature, and we'll talk about the college football championship in a bit. But no SEC team in a while in the national championship. You had a Big Ten team, and you had a Pac-12 team. And now with the Pac-12 ending, they're going to become a Big Ten team as well.
Well, yeah, because basically, what is it? The Pac-12 is gone essentially,
Right.
and
And
next year
these numbers mean nothing. Big Ten, but almost but in schools.
it's money. That's it.
Right.
But speaking of a connection to this story, because I see it as the next topic, Pete Carroll, because now we're going to head into the NFL Black Monday. In case people don't know, Black Monday is the Monday right after the last week of the regular season. This is when head coaches get their heads rolled out of franchises. And the first one, if you want to throw that up there, Pete Carroll not being brought back as Seahawks head coach, reportedly being offered now when I'm saying this fictitiously, a front office role. And the team is reportedly eyeing Dan Quinn, who's already been a head coach, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Was with the Atlanta Falcons for about 5 or 6 years, including their 2016-2017 NFC Championship win, which brought him to Super Bowl 51. Of course, very infamously falling 1 quarter and an overtime short of a Super Bowl championship. This 28-3 team. Pete Carroll, yeah, this one I said to lead with this one, not just because it's the most recent of all the firings as of the time we're recording, but it's the most shocking because the Seahawks over the last couple of seasons, you thought, I mean, Nick, when Russell got traded, we thought that okay, Seahawks are probably going to enter into some sort of rebuild mode, and maybe Pete Carroll is kind of going to be done. But over the last 2 seasons, I mean, we talk about it all the time on Football Friday about Geno Smith and what he has done to revitalize his career while as the leading quarterback in Seattle. And it got to the point where last year they managed to sneak in as the last team in the NFC. And this year they came just this short. If Green Bay had lost to the Bears in week 18, we would have seen Seattle in this year's playoffs. So all the success that Pete Carroll has had, and then all of a sudden just he's not going to be back. Now, granted, he is 72, but we have seen people, who are older in positions of power, both out of sports. So I don't know necessarily how much we can hold that over his head. Was it maybe a little concern? Yes, but at the same time, like I said, all the success that he was having, you can't really just pump the brakes here. Now, where it goes next depends upon, like, we don't have the information as we're sitting here and talking about it. If this is something that Carroll maybe had in mind for the future, then maybe it's not so bad and kind of understandable. Now, am I a little concerned about this? Yeah, because I am one of those people who will always be the first to point out that just because you're a great head coach does not mean that you will be a great executive. We have seen that in the NBA and MLB, maybe a little bit even in the NFL. Guys try to make
Unless you're Brad Stevens with the Celtics.
right. But I feel like Brad Stevens, and I was talking with a colleague about it, Brad Stevens, the exceptions and not the rule.
Well,
Brad Stevens was
The one thing I will say about that is he kind of got jettisoned out of the head coaching job, and there was really no other place for him to go. They wanted him in the organization, so that was the only place they could really put him. And he was always a great strategizer, like putting a team together. He just couldn't
Yeah,
coach it.
absolutely. But my point is, both of them kind of understood that, and I think both of them kind of agreed that that was a good direction to go in. And I would say, considering the Celtics, maybe that was the right direction to go in. But something like this, because now that brings us to this report that maybe they're eyeing Dan Quinn. Look, I get it. Dan Quinn has had its fair share of success. Like I said, he has an NFC title with the Falcons. And what he's done the last few seasons with the Cowboys defense as their coordinator, phenomenal. Dallas has one of the better defensive units in football the last few seasons. But this is not like if Dan Quinn taking the Carolina job, if he was going to be the full replacement for Frank Reich, then I would say yes, absolutely, because that's an upgrade. And considering the direction that Carolina team has gone, if they had put Dan Quinn as their full-time head coach, there would have been nowhere to go but up from there. Pete Carroll,
Right.
Seattle, after all the success that they've had, even in the post Russell Wilson era, even in the later Russell Wilson era, when they were constantly falling short in the NFC divisional or wild card. I feel like I'm worried, are those going to be too big of shoes to fill? Because coming off of all these winning seasons, especially after, the last couple of seasons with Geno as the quarterback, that's going to be a high expectation. This can't be something like where Dan Quinn would want to tear it down. You have to go in and continue to fight. Now, is Seattle going to be the kind of team that competes with San Francisco for the division soon? I feel like Seattle, I mean, we saw them compete a little bit with Seattle earlier in the season, but I think Seattle in the NFC West is the solid number 2. Like, they can go head to head with but San Fran is obviously the better team at this point. My point being that they can't afford to go in a backwards direction if they're going to hire somebody like a Dan Quinn to replace Pete Carroll.
Right. And the way I look at Seattle, they're a good team. They're not a great team. Obviously, he was the head coach for the one Super Bowl that they won. They've made the playoffs a bunch. I think he was the head coach, for 12 seasons, I think was the number that they threw out there.
Oh, for Pete Carroll?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was about 12.
It was a long time, long run. But I think it was probably just time to move on to someone else. But I don't think Dan Quinn is the answer by any means. Like, we saw him as a head coach. That's really not his forte. He is a defensive specialist, if I haven't seen one, by any means. He knows how to make defenses roll. Why do you think the Cowboys are a much better team this year? Defense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it helps that Dak's having a much better season, but defense wins championships, and that's what's happening.
Obviously,
right now.
that's the cliche, but dare I say, the Cowboys might be a sneaky favorite when it comes to winning the potentially winning the Super Bowl. And I feel like I just threw up in my mouth saying that. But I'll give you the sound effect just because I know I've been eyeing it. Damn Cowboy. Thanks, Sherry.
But other news in the realm, Mike Vrabel fired as Titans head coach after 2 sub 500 seasons. Big mistake, in my opinion. I think they screwed it up.
I feel like I may have understood it last year after the collapse that they had that allowed Jacksonville to get into the playoffs as the AFC South champion. But at the same time, Tennessee, before that collapse last year, Tennessee was the AFC South. Before Trevor Lawrence came around, and before what's his name, Philadelphia, came around, that he's now leading the head coach. Oh, Doug Peterson.
Oh, Doug Peterson, yeah.
Yeah. Before they came around, they were the clear best team in the AFC South, especially after once 2019 hit and you saw Andrew Luck bow out from Indianapolis. Like for that 3 or so year period, there was nobody better but Tennessee. And that was trademarked, Nick, and this was something you called back in the early audio only podcast days, when you called that Tennessee was going to beat New England right before Tom Brady was sent packing out of New England.
I remember that too.
But yeah, but what this tells me, Nick, like we talk about big mistake, this is definitely a shock. Not as shocking as Carroll, but it is. What this tells me, considering Vrabel's gone, considering Malik Willis is going to be entering his second year, as presumably as the starting quarterback, as Tannehill is going to be gone, considering that Derrick Henry is going to be gone from the team, I don't think he's going to be done with the NFL. I think somebody out there is going to be desperate for a running back and is going to scoop him up very quickly. Like his market value, we talk about the depressed running market value, but I feel like Derrick Henry, he's not going to get CMC money, and he's older, so he's probably not getting a lot of money. But somebody, is going to be quick like that to just make him an offer to sign him.
I mean, the whole situation with the Titans is a mess. Their quarterback situation is a mess.
My point, Nick, was that, and TJ Spears is obviously going to supplant him as the star running back.
Great player, by the way, too.
Right. Great player. Malik Willis obviously still developing, still microscope, a lot of doubts with him. But my point, that youth, those questions, and Vrabel gone, especially when you also consider there was a report out there that they tried to trade Vrabel, but apparently they just didn't seem like they were going to get.
The ownership didn't want to deal with the headache. That was part of the issue they didn't want to do.
And I think they might have had a vision, and they realistically looked themselves and said, we're probably not going to get this. So,
by the way, what people don't realize is Vrabel is tough on players, and I just don't think that locker room could handle his tough New England Patriot ways.
Which also helps lead to my point. All of this is screaming rebuild. This screams rebuild and youth movement in Tennessee.
By the way, Will Levis is not the answer. I'm just going to say that now. Like, he played great. He was a second-tier quarterback. Now, obviously, everyone's going to say, oh, my God, you got it a lot. Well, duh, because he was the first pick in the second round. You stole him for massive value at the top of the second round when he was supposed to be like a top 7 or 8 pick, which was way overvalued.
Right. I remember sitting here with you and I think Johnny just being flabbergasted that he was going to be on the board still during the second round. And we were questioning what they kind of knew that we sitting there didn't. My point being that, I kind of foresee what you say, that, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the answer, but I feel like the direction that with the youth movement, with the potential rebuild, Vrabel is not a coach that fits that. Vrabel is not a rebuild coach.
Well, right. And him and, oh my God, why is the name slipping my head? Lions head coach.
Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell is the same way. I don't think he could fit in a rebuild motto. Like he's a guy that has to push his guys. Same thing with Vrabel. Like the Patriots were a veteran status. That's how Bill made his money and his championships, always constantly replenishing in veteran status. And that's kind of what Vrabel is. Having a guy like Derrick Henry, having a guy like D-Hop as a receiver, who, by the way, I think it was in week 18, he ended up hitting his bonus incentive, if I'm not mistaken, which at the very end, by the way. Good for them. That team was never going anywhere, though. Like, just, they made it close at the end of the season.
Right. But actually,
yeah.
No, it's funny that you say that. Sometimes I forget D-Hop is on the Titans. Considering what I just said, youth build and rebuild. D-Hop, that's going to be a question. Unless you're going to keep him around as like a veteran locker room leader kind of guy towards the end of his career.
I doubt it, because I think he's in a point of his career where he's got to go be like a 3 for a competing team. Like, so they have their 1 and their 2, and they add a 3.
Right. Kind of like, and I'm kind of disgusted to say this, but kind of like what think it was Le'Veon did when he joined the Chiefs, or Antonio Brown did when he joined the Bucks to kind of go chase after the Super Bowl the year that the Chiefs and Bucks met in
Or Gronk when Gronk went to the Bucks.
or Gronk went to the Bucks too, right, to join Brady.
I mean, and that's the one rule I don't like about the NFL. Like, you could join a team in the postseason, which I don't get.
Well, I mean, considering that Dalvin Cook is now going to be with the Ravens for their postseason.
Well, that was during the regular season still, but
yeah.
Watch, he's going to win a ring with the Ravens now. He's going to win it's going to happen. Just But you know what? Vrabel will end up with another job. I promise you that. He will. It might not be where you want, but he will get another job.
Yeah, and Nick, honestly, I know we're talking about Carroll under the presumption that he's going to be in the front office of Seattle. If for some reason Carroll isn't, within 5 seconds he will be scooped up by somebody.
Oh, you're talking about Carroll or Vrabel?
Carroll. I said if for some reason those front office report story isn't true, or he doesn't go to the front office.
I don't think it's going to be with a playoff team. I think I could see him going to like a build team because he's that type of guy that is like high energy, motivate the team. I hate to say this, but the Bears would have been a good spot for him.
Yeah, but Matt Eberflus is going to be sticking around, which I don't get this. Carroll's gone, Vrabel's gone, but
Eberflus stays. No, and I told you before we came on here. Oh, he's calling everybody. Take the OC and the DC are the hot positions. Okay, Matt, what happy pills did you take? There you go.
Yeah, that's Eberflus laughing on his happy pills.
Right, but all right, let's move around because we got a lot more. Ron Rivera.
Yeah. Let's do the expected one. We knew that this was going to happen.
Yeah, this was an obvious. The team stunk. Sam Howell, I think, was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL this year.
Yep.
They made trades. They traded
Chase Young
to the 49ers.
Right. And then they traded Sweat over to Chicago. And the sad fact is they traded Sweat, and Sweat still led their team in sacks. I think he's the first defensive player
in history
to lead 2 teams in sacks in the same season.
It was incredible. I mean, that just shows you how bad Washington was. But
yeah, I think the story is the second part here. That's the big one. Bob Myers, who some of you may remember as one of the executives who helped piece together the Golden State Warriors dynasty of the very recent past in the last decade. He is going to be joining Washington in an executive role and basically is going to be helping the team in the selection of their next head coach.
As my favorite term goes, consultant, essentially. I still, and no one's really asking this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are we just going to skip over Eric Bieniemy for the 10 millionth time?
Imagine that happens. Just imagine that happens.
How many times that rumor is literally the boy who cried wolf. Every time we hear it. But just throw Eric Bieniemy's name out there. He's an offensive genius. Oh, wait, doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah, but here's my question. Considering some of those names, the bigger names that are becoming available, like a Vrabel, do they see that as an opportunity? Because is Washington, with somebody consulting them like Bob Myers, Nick, and maybe you might know this better being the NBA person more than me, do you see Washington kind of going with Vrabel over Bieniemy as a means to say, the Dan Snyder era is over. We're tired of this crap of losing, and they hire somebody like Vrabel to make a statement and say, we're here to play, basically.
In my opinion, Vrabel would be the perfect spot to go to Washington. Motivator, like I said earlier. There is some veterans there, not many, but there are some. But taking the Patriots approach over to Washington would be, I think that would show some discipline to make the team better. Sam Howell can't be the quarterback. Now, I don't know what is their draft number, because I know that came out.
Yeah, let me have a look at that. But here's my question, by the way, because you say perfect position. But what happens if Bill Belichick leaves New England after all, and that position opens up. Does
2,
all of
by
a
the way.
sudden? Oh, they
They're
are number
2 overall.
You're right. I forgot if it was them or not. My question though, if the Patriots job opens up and you're Vrabel, do you think you go back to New England to succeed Belichick?
That's a tough one. First of all, I'd be very careful about succeeding Belichick.
Just
That
because
is
you
tough
have to
shoes. Tough shoes to fill.
Actually, let me add to that. Tough shoes to fill, and just as weak, if not weaker, of a team.
That's not even a question. It is a weaker team than before he left it. Now, obviously, that's not fair because he had Tom Brady for most of his head coaching career in New England. We have no idea who the quarterback is going to be in New England. New England picks 3rd overall. So
it's gonna be one of these guys. It's gonna be May or Caleb Williams, probably.
So it all depends on preference.
But you know what?
Yeah.
I say that out loud. Commanders, you just had to have the 2 pick, which means they probably might go with May or Williams, and we still don't know what's going on with Chicago. Imagine they trade Justin Fields away so that way they can draft one of these quarterbacks.
There's one of 2 options. Either they trade down and they get a player of use, or they're going to trade Justin Fields maybe to get another 1st-round pick, which would be insane, on top of the 1st overall pick.
Right. And considering Eberflus is staying around, which is a shock to me, I have no idea in the direction that team is going to go. I mean,
now, interesting enough. Oh, good, good.
No, I was going to say that's a question. We're not going to talk about the coaching moves on Football Friday this coming week, but next week during the divisional round, we'll add some commentary. I feel like that's a question for our Chicago fan. I feel like that's a Zan question about what he thinks is going to happen.
So, interestingly enough, Atlanta picks 8th overall. So, I could see Chicago trading down to 8 to kind of move the spot out of the top 5. They get what they want. Or trading Fields, getting the 8th pick.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they have 1 and 8. Oh, wait. They have 9 too. What am I saying? They have the 1 and the 1 and the 9 overall. But imagine they wanted to trade Fields and they got their other pick. That would just be insane. Who did that? Was it the Texans who traded up for 2?
Last year, the Texans had 2 when they selected Stroud. Then they traded up to 3 to get Will Anderson Jr. And see how that turned out for them. That they're in the playoffs as the AFC South champions.
By the way, can we say bravo to the Texans? By the way, because Stroud was incredible, even with the injuries. Incredible season. Who they play? They play the Browns in the 1st round.
Yeah, and I honestly love the matchup because you got 2 teams who had the lowest of expectations for different reasons. One being a rebuild, the other, all the injuries that the Browns had. And they're both in the playoffs, both with incredible seasons. And I would say with what's the name of the Texans head coach?
I'm looking it up. I don't remember at the moment.
Browns we have
D'Amico Ryans.
Ryans, yeah. So I'm saying with Ryans, it's Stefanski. It's a battle between, and I'll say this on Football Friday tomorrow, Nick.
Yeah.
It's a battle of 2 potential Coach of the Year candidates because both of them have a case.
I was just going to say, I think it's a runaway for D'Amico Ryans, to be honest. I think he's had the best year. Now, people are going to say Stefanski, obviously with the Browns. I think it's those 2. I think those are the top 2 guys. If that's the case, I think D'Amico Ryans deserves a lot more credit with a rookie quarterback.
I think so. Although I can't trust Stefanski because, like we said, no Nick Chubb, no Deshaun Watson, and they managed to go on the run that they did, finishing 11-6.
Yeah, it was an incredible season, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. But Black Monday off to a fierce start. Now, let's move around to your realm of the world a little bit in New York.
Yeah, we're not done.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, we're not done here. So this is not a firing. There were Giants firings. The offensive line coach gone. The special coordinator gone. I think the linebackers coach was gone as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
So they were changing around some of the coaching, and apparently that rubbed Wink Martindale the wrong way. Storms into the office, has a whole blow up with Brian Daboll. Now, there were already rumors earlier in December from Jay Glazer Fox that
I
Daboll
saw
and
that.
Martindale may have been in some sort of clash, and they tried to play it off like everything was cool. I guess not. Martindale is no longer the defensive coordinator of the team.
Well, you know what Wick Martindale said to Brian Daboll?
You need to shut the fuck up.
That's literally almost what he basically said to Daboll on the way out. Now, just my perception,
Yes.
I don't get how you can return after that. That's just my opinion. You can't go back in the building after that.
Okay, so you're referring to how basically he stormed out of the building, but
And
he never
resigned.
submitted, but he never had an official resignation letter. So there we were questioning what the hell was going on, and then the next day, which is the day we're recording, he officially submits the resignation letter. So
You can't return after that. Come on.
yes, and it's kind of unfortunate because I love the way that Wink Martindale used the defense because I think the Giants, and Nick, I think even you would agree with me, the Giants had an absolutely underrated defense in the NFL.
He was incredible. And by the way, known for the blitz, obviously.
Mhm.
And just
Kayvon
Yeah.
well under him his first 2 seasons. I got to give credit to Deonte Banks, the cornerback that they selected in the first round of this year's draft. I think he had a decent rookie season. They had some pretty decent players over on their defense, and I'm worried about what this is going to look like under another coach. Now, a defensive coordinator. Now, does this look bad on Brian Daboll? I mean, potentially. And I'll tell you, and I'll say to the world here, Nick, what I told you before we started recording. I have said my fair share of crap about Brian Daboll for some of the stuff that he pulled during this season. Whether
you have.
whether it was going for 2 against the Rams, whether it was not using Tommy DeVito and trusting him with throwing against the Jets. And I've said some of those things, letting the be, but on the other hand, Nick, 6-11, and I said, that this team was probably going to finish 7-10 or 8-9. Like, I not for the most part predict how this Giants season was going to go. That the first half of the season was going to be terrible. They'd only win a game or two, and then November, December, we had those weaker opponents where they were going to. So that's basically how this season played out. So considering they had the 3rd toughest schedule in the NFL, and they still managed to get 6-7 wins, especially after losing your starting quarterback, especially when your offensive line was weak. Once again, that's just the given story of the Giants and Jets at this point, the offensive line. And one of your best, what kind of receiving core did you have? Your best receiver was Darius Slade. For 6-7 wins out of that, you have to give some form of credit. You have to bring Daboll back. And now I told you what I think is going to happen. I think there will be Daboll, but I think it also stretches over, like he is going to be enveloping 2 other people in the pressure realm. I think this offseason there's going to be a lot of pressure on Joe Shine to make moves to help Brian Daboll and get a team. And there's going to be
cap
pressure.
Space, though?
I should have done research on that. I don't know what the cap space the Giants have for the 2024 offseason.
I'm looking it up as we speak. But
okay,
and also the other thing, I just want to mention one thing also because I'm sure you saw it.
$36.6 million,
which is a lot. That's a lot of cap space.
Yeah. So no, but goes to my point. The pressure is on Shine that you got to get a receiver. You got to improve the offensive line, whether that be through the draft or whether that be through free agency. I know there have been a couple of people. I don't know if it was one of those people saying T. Higgins is going to be a free agent. Try to make a pursuit for him. But the reason there's going to be pressure on Shine and Daboll, Nick, is because I think number one, when we do our little thing of like our hometown teams who has the pressure, it's going to be Danny at this point. Even if Saquon, it's Danny. because Danny is playing for his future at this point. If after next season you're not happy, if Mara and Tish are not happy, and they choose to move on from Daboll and Shine, there's no way in hell you'd be able to bring back Danny after going through Spags and then going through Daboll. That's just
Hell no.
That's impossible for player development.
Well, their head coaching search has been terrible over the last decade, trying to keep coaches in, and they just can't do what they do. I don't like Daboll has his good moments, but he has his really bad moments where he is a little too aggressive offensively at times, and it gets him in trouble. And I could say the same thing, obviously, with the Lions. Same thing,
Right,
over-aggressive coach. But the Lions have a much better offensive stable than the Giants do. They get away with more things.
Right. Like, is Danny a great quarterback? No. And it looked bad when Tommy DeVito kind of outplayed him this season. DeVito got benched. But
right,
it is also something to be said when you signed Darren Waller, and that was a miss. Darius Slayton, like I just said, was your number one receiver. Think about what that says. And then your offensive line, I mean, sitcom.
That offensive line was a joke, and including some burger flipping in the process of that. But this team, I'll even throw the Jets in here too. New York football was a fucking joke in 2023.
And like I said, and the sad part is, even as, they were a joke, both of those teams, the Giants and Jets, have the potential. Like I just said, 6-7 wins with the kind of tough schedule that you have. Now, next season for the Giants, you're still going to have some tough scheduling because you got to play the A4, who just made history as the first division since 1937 of all above 500 teams. But you're also going to be playing, Nick, for the Giants. You're also going to be playing the NFC South, who barely just managed to get, there was a chance in Week 18 an 8-9 team could have won that division too. So next season, you got to improve off of 6 wins.
Well, yeah, obviously. You called that. You thought they were going to have 6 wins.
Right. But next season, when you have the weak NFC South to play, I'll give some slack in that you got to play the AFC North, so that's going to be tough. But you got to return to 500 at that point next year. You got to have at least 8 or 9 wins.
I just don't see that because Daniel Jones coming off a massive injury. Even though he's healthy, you got to find his sea legs.
Right, but that's the thing actually, and something that I was considering with the whole draft and such. A torn ACL in November. Is Danny really going to be ready to play in September?
No, of course not. I mean, well, let me clarify that. He'll be healthy, but what does it take? A good 3 to 4 weeks at least?
Right. ACL is kind of a near 1-year injury, so you're going to need another back. You're going to need a decent quarterback, and if you're not confident in Tyrod for however long he's going to be out, if you're not confident in Tommy DeVito for however long Danny might be out, you got to get another backup quarterback until he's ready.
Yeah, and also Tyrod, I just don't trust, and even though he got hurt, he played well. Now, I could say there's a fraud alert for a certain team they played.
That tomorrow. But
I don't know. And DeVito's not coming back. Can we just admit that now? He's just not coming back.
But then the Giants and Jets are in the same boat, and you got to sign up decent backup quarterback.
There's not much out there, to be honest. But this is a bad situation. I don't blame Wink Martindale for walking away. He got that defense to play more than halfway decent for the amount that shit they had to put up with.
Yeah. All right. Let's get away from football for a second. Let's talk about a story that's continuing on that we talked about last week. It was one of our top stories last week. So the latest on the whole Jimmy Kimmel, Aaron Rodgers saga with Pat McAfee. They continue to trade barbs. Jimmy Kimmel returned from his holiday
long break
on Monday. Yeah. Okay. And he got out in front before Aaron Rodgers on Tuesday and said what he needed to say and basically tore Rodgers a new one. Rodgers making the response on Tuesday, claiming he never called Jimmy Kimmel a pedophile. But then, but then, like you kind of said at the top of the show, goes with Pat McAfee goes in two different directions. One, in that the whole Kimmel and Rodgers saga, which is apparently ending with Rodgers will not be making his spots with the last 4 or 5 weeks because his spots were going to come to an end because the NFL season is coming to an end. But Rodgers any appearances on the Pat McAfee show during the postseason. But then on the other hand, I think this was on Friday of last week, around I think January 5th. Pat McAfee goes on a whole rant on his show, basically claiming that ESPN, who broadcasts his show, is sabotaging.
Yeah, this was not a good situation. Now, I got to preface this again, and if you had a chance on our YouTube channel and on TikTok and all our platforms at ETV Network, I put up a clip from episode 214 where you and I discussed the opening rant, I like to call it, of this situation. People forget that even though it's a 5-year, $85 million deal with McAfee and his show to be at ESPN, people forget it's a license. It's basically they're licensing McAfee and his content to be on their TV airwaves, their YouTube airwaves, their digital airwaves. Mm-hmm. So I'll ask you, because you're more savvy than most people who are ignorant about the media. What does a license mean?
A right to broadcast.
Right, but what can't you do to somebody if you're not technically in control of the content?
Well, then you can't tell somebody what to do.
You can't change the content. Right. So when you're licensed, you get the content, it goes to you, and it's distributed through the platform, and that's it. You have no control. You have no editorial control. You can't do anything. You're a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched the Jimmy Kimmel rant. I hate Jimmy Kimmel, every bone in Jimmy Kimmel's body. I've never liked Jimmy Kimmel. I think he's a political hack. Yeah.
But you even admitted last week that despite your hate of Jimmy Kimmel, you have some sympathy for him. You think you side with him in this one.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the one rare instance where I will take Jimmy Kimmel's side, even though I think he's a liberal hack. But
but now we were talking last week about the potential slander lawsuit. If I'm not mistaken, you had told me that he wasn't on the Epstein list.
So he was absolutely 100% not on the Epstein list.
Which means this opened up a potential slander lawsuit. And I had said that Iger needs to be involved.
Yes, and I think he did behind the scenes. So you're not going to hear anything. But this is Disney on Disney crime. But at the same time, I was watching Le Batard show, which, again, ironically, ESPN content before he had his own issues with Norby Williamson, the executive in this story that the sabotage.
I was going to say the same guy that Pat McAfee called out.
So, for people who don't know, Norby Williamson is like the shadow puppet executive that's in charge, kind of. So
from the shadow realm.
Yeah. So Jimmy Pitaro is the new guy that's in charge. You have Iger at the top, who's the CEO of Disney. You have Pitaro, who runs ESPN. And then Norby is kind of like the in-between Pitaro and all the talent. So McAfee comes out and says, "Oh, I think this guy is sabotaging our numbers and trying to get us to look bad and maybe get us out of here." One, the only way you get away with something like that is if you're a licensee and not a contract that is directly under the company line.
Mm-hmm.
So this doesn't look good. Then Kimmel comes out with an 8-minute rant, which, by the way, was not funny at all whatsoever, and basically insults Aaron's intelligence and says the only 2 A's he has are in his name, which was a horrible joke, by the way. It sounded like a laugh track was going on behind Jimmy. And Aaron comes back, like you said, and basically says, "Well, I wasn't saying he was on the list. I wouldn't make those claims." Well, Aaron it kind of is a little hard to believe you after the amount of shit you've said, including
Saying that you were- saying
aliens.
that-
Yeah.
I was
What?
going to say, saying that you were, ready to pop the bottle once the list
Yeah,
comes
that
out.
was bad. If he didn't say that, maybe it would have been a little easier to believe. But how am I supposed to believe you, Aaron, when you're talking about aliens, when you're talking about how you were immunized from COVID, or that you did your own research more than a scientist did?
And then you got COVID and decided it would be great to show the world the benefit. I mean, the dangers of COVID.
Ugh. But this is a lose-lose situation. And by the way, Jimmy called out Pat McAfee also, because Pat, which, by the way, I'm a huge fan of McAfee. I like the way he does his content. I like guys who don't care about the rules. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar?
Well, Nick, I guess I know where you're going. McAfee is the bleepster. He eggs his guest on and gets those reactions.
Now,
and then you have AJ Hawk just sitting there like,
and you know what? I'm not going after AJ Hawk because it's not 100% fair. But like,
I know. No,
what does he do?
I he's a meme. He's a meme of silence.
It's like they count the amount of seconds he's talking during the show. I was like, oh, but I don't know. Pat says that this is trash talk. I'm sorry, and I agree with Jimmy Kimmel when he said it during the rant. Thought one thing I agreed with: you don't make jokes about pedophilia. I don't care who you are. I don't care how famous you are. I don't care how many followers you have. I don't care how much money you have. You don't make jokes about pedophilia at all.
And look, do I honestly think Rodgers is never coming on again? No. Here's what I think is happening. He's not going to make his appearances during the postseason.
It's temporary.
And then once it's preseason time, he's going to come back. So for all of you saying, oh, you're bowing to the corporate, you're bowing to the mouse, shut up. Rodgers is going to come back. He's just leaving earlier. He's just leaving earlier than expected because of a stupid controversy that he caused. But it's only for it. Like I said, it's only for a month because the NFL's already in postseason. Rodgers isn't playing in the postseason. He hasn't played at all this season because of his injury. So relax. As Aaron Rodgers likes to say. Sorry, Nick.
RELAX.
I'll let that one slide. But
he will be back in August because listen, was McAfee wrong in this kind of scenario? Yeah, he's had his fair share of wrongs in this scenario. But listen, what we said last week, nothing is of major consequences going to happen because ESPN knows they cannot afford to lose McAfee because Pat McAfee brings in the younger demographic that they desperately need.
Well, yeah, we're talking about digital numbers, which is where, excuse me, ESPN was kind of failing on the last couple of years, like that.
Right, failing in digital numbers, and then technically it's a radio show, and we already talked about last year how much ESPN has kind of, basically.
Well, it's not a radio show; it's more of like a digital podcast.
Okay, my point being that the broadcasting kind of format of audio, they basically have just completely thrown away via ESPN radio, and then just don't do really anything other than taking the shows that they already normally air on ESPN and just putting the audio version.
Yeah, which is stupid. But this whole thing, Pat is never going to get in trouble. And the other claim I want to clear up, because people misconstrue this with McAfee's show too. Oh, well, Aaron's not going to get his paycheck because ESPN took him off the air. Hello. Everyone out there in the listening and watching audience.
Well, didn't you just explain it last week that it's McAfee's show?
McAfee's production company pays Aaron Rodgers $1 million. Okay? Not that Aaron Rodgers needs that money by any means, but not that I like to reach into people's pockets, but ESPN can't do anything about that. Now, could they nicely go to Pat McAfee and just say, you know what? Let's take a few weeks. Let's agree to disagree. And when everything kind of slows down and the PR machine kind of blows over, he can come back. Now, the other part of this, what's the ESPN PR guy, Mike Floss or whatever his name was called out also, and he called him out on the air for putting out that PR statement about the McAfee show numbers and how they were slightly misconstrued. Now, Andrew Marchand, who's been on this show a few times before, came out and said that the show is on par with Get Up. So it's doing normal numbers. But like he was saying, everyone wants their digital and social media numbers involved. And that's just not how TV ratings work.
Yeah, no, that's not how TV ratings work. I mean, actually, Nick, I'll give you a perfect example. Hate to bring them up again, but WWE, their television rating numbers aren't great. But you know what? Look at their digital numbers. How they cut the 3-hour Raws up into the segments and post them all on YouTube and split everything into parts and, their Instagram stories and on the social media platforms, they hit it off really well.
It's nuts the amount of viral they do.
That is a company that gets it.
Yes, but if you're not using digital and social media properly, and that's what we're kind of tinkering ourselves with this network to try to figure out and build on, which we are. But people have to remember, digital social media numbers don't count. They're nice. They make you more valuable, but they don't count if you're on TV.
But that said, does the TV rating matter as much anymore in this age?
No.
You can't put everything on the TV rating number.
No. And that's what people were questioning. Is Pat McAfee worth the headache with Aaron Rodgers to stay on TV?
But that's the thing, because you said, they have numbers similar to Get Up. But that's what makes Pat McAfee's show worth a lot on Get Up. Because Get Up
because he's got the younger demo. That's why.
And doesn't have the digital follow that Pat McAfee show has.
That's right. Yep.
All right. In other news, we have 4 more stories here. Let's wrap things up. Obviously, we got the national championship that we mentioned. Number 1 versus number 2 Washington. Nick, did I not say that under the old committee where they just selected 2 teams, it would be the 2 unbeatens logically? And guess what? In spite of all the controversy with Alabama and the Florida State and Georgia, look, we end up exactly at that. The 2 unbeaten teams meeting for the championship. And Michigan, I mean, you got to give credit to the Michigan defense. I think the stat was they pressured Penix on, 72% of his dropbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. Jim Harbaugh is a winning coach wherever he has gone. That's just proven track record, and that's why I think he's going to end up in the NFL, and he's going to make an NFL franchise successful again wherever he goes. This is not a surprise.
I know there's been a lot of controversy about the cheating, and does that look bad? Yes. Does it kind of end the feel-good story of Washington from the Pac-12, in the Pac-12's last season, falling just short of the national championship? But I would say that I think it's nice to see Harbaugh finally winning the championship. Obviously, the last time he was in a championship game was Super Bowl, I think it was 47, when he played against his brother John from the Ravens. Yeah, the Harbaugh Bowl. The Blackout Bowl as well when Superdome went down. The power went down the third quarter.
But Harbaugh is a great coach. Now, people knock on him because he's a little bit aggressive on the sidelines, and but you know what? To be a good coach, you have to have some passion. Like that's
the other thing I would say, cheating college football. If you're going to be mad about sign stealing, I think there's a lot of other things to be a little mad about.
Yeah, I mean, but he's been, what was he suspended twice this past season?
Yeah.
I mean, probably should have been off the field completely, but we all know that ESPN and college football was never going to allow Harbaugh to stay off the field for the national championship game. I would tell you that right now.
Or any sort of playoff game.
Now, like I said, he did an interview after the game. He's talking about being back the next spring. BS. He's not coming back.
I could see it in one way, but then as you mentioned to me before we get on, he hired Don Yee or whatever his name is. The
Yeah,
NFL.
he's a high profile agent in the NFL circles.
I think the storyline of Jim Harbaugh and where he goes next is just as interesting as the Belichick saga.
And I think we're talking about like a John Gruden long-term contract. Like
Oh,
100 million plus.
Oh, funny you say that. Did you also hear that the Saints might be interested in Gruden to reunite him with Derek Carr?
Why?
Because the spatter too, I banana man.
All right, whatever.
All right. In other news, one more football story, two basketball stories to quickly go through. Speaking of your Jets from before, according to Ian Rappaport, the Jets may be looking at trading Zach Wilson. I say, for what?
Bucket of footballs? Maybe? I'm trying to figure out how to react to this story. More like, because
I mean,
what are you? Who wants him?
I mean, obviously Rodgers is coming back, but does this mean you trust, unless you do something like we talked about with the Giants and Jets and the need of backup quarterbacks? Unless if Rodgers goes down again, you trust that Trevor Siemian is going to lead your team in a 2024 season?
Yeah, no, no. But I don't see this happening. No one's gonna want him unless they want a project. Yeah, I don't think he's getting traded. This might be the Jets just like trying to save face before they release him. Like, let's just throw him out on the trade market. Maybe someone will give him like a 5th or 6th round pick,
or a 7th,
whatever it is, a throwaway pick. Hey, maybe you can get the next Mr. Irrelevant, like Brock Purdy.
I was just thinking. All right. A couple of NBA stories quickly. Draymond Green got reinstated, suspended 12 games. Goes on his podcast and mentions that when the indefinite suspension first came down, he met with Adam Silver and basically said he's done. He couldn't handle the pressure anymore and wanted to retire. And Silver basically said, I'm not going to allow you to do that. And basically talked retirement and yeah.
Well, just for starters, because that's what he's so used to doing. But
you mean,
yeah. I'll tell you a reason he's not retiring. He's not retiring. I don't think he was suspended long enough. This is turning into Rasheed Wallace, who constantly would get suspended for running his mouth and getting technical fouls, and getting into fights. And Draymond Green is a head case. And I couldn't believe when the news was announced that the Warriors signed to a 4-year, $100 million deal. The Warriors were bidding against themselves.
Well, it goes back to the point that I made mention of when we were talking about Draymond Green and getting signed. Like, when we were talking about what does this mean to Klay Thompson this coming NBA offseason? Because if I was the Warriors and I could only have one, I would pick Klay Thompson over Draymond Green.
Klay Thompson hasn't had a good year, though, to be honest. Like, he's had a down year. Paul Lombardi, who does 3&D, who I was, his show had just come out a couple days ago. He was saying that this Warriors team is in trouble. Chris Paul is out with a hand injury for 4 to 6 weeks. Klay Thompson looks lost. Now, over the last 3 to 5 seasons, he's had 2 season-ending injuries, I think. But
okay, I guess I just stick with him though, because at the same time he's not the head case.
Well, there's one. Let's put it this way. Paul said it, and I agree with it. There's one player that's safe from going anywhere.
Steph.
And Steph is the only guy that's not going anywhere. To be honest, they might cut their losses with Draymond Green. That's going to be expensive. I think Andrew Wiggins is going to be gone. He was a good player, but they need a full new change of scenery going on over there. There was a story that came out about Anthony Kuminga, who's the young star that Steve Kerr was doesn't like him and was benching him when he was actually having good games, which I don't understand why coaches do that, but they do. This Draymond Green situation is bad. They shouldn't have re-signed him. he has his podcast, which he uses as a weapon instead of a media tool. And if I'm Adam Silver, I would have said, "Go ahead, retire. We don't need you." But we all know Adam Silver is not going to do that
The
because,
players commissioner.
well, no, because Draymond Green brings eyeballs, even though he's punching people out and causing headaches for the league. He draws attention. And what is Adam Silver like? Attention. So this is dumb. It's a moot point because we all know he was going to be back. Just like a certain other person we're going to finish the show with.
Well,
He's a
actually,
headache too.
hold on one second here, Nick, because I think something can be worked out. Because Draymond Green, let's say, he really didn't want to come back.
Oh, no.
Then, well, you know what? There might be another team that might have been interested in him.
Long Dong Tigers. Ni hao! Ni hao! Ni hao!
I knew that was coming.
All right, here, have your little rant again. Have your little rant that you already were ranting about with that video that you posted.
Yeah, so if anyone didn't see that video that I did like late at night the other night, I don't know what the name of the song is that's from, but like I was doing the news and I was like na 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 na.
No, hey, goodbye.
Yeah, and I just was, and like I saw the reactions coming in on the video, like, "You asshole, what's wrong with you?" And I was responding to some of them, and I was saying,
it was a little rough. I don't wish ill will on the guy.
First of all, let's be clear. I never wished ill will on the guy. I'm just saying he kind of got what he deserved after all the nonsense that he pulled.
Like, I was like, do I think he should have been suspended a hell of a lot more than 25 games? Yes. But I'm not going to root for some sort of injury to...
First of all, I don't root for injuries, but I just was... and remember the incident that happened on the court just recently where...
In other words, your point is that this is karma, which I will agree with you a little bit in that now he gets to sit out for more than 25 games without much choice because he ends up getting hurt.
You know how they say, like, the ball is right? Like, when you're playing the game, you miss a free throw because you weren't supposed to be fouled. This is like someone somewhere up there saying, "Oh, you were right. Now he's out for the year." Like, it was going to happen one way or the other.
Because the 25 games thing, Nick.
It's ludicrous. Ludicrous.
Okay, he didn't show up like that State Farm commercial.
I forgot about that. You're right.
I wish he would have. I wish he would have showed up here. My point being that, obviously you talk about the 25 games. You mentioned karma. Well, we just already said whose fault that was when we mentioned this story. And where is that graphic over here? There you go.
Well, I won't blame him for the injury. That's a John Morant
thing. The injury is not his fault, but the whole thing going on with the 25 games, the idea of karma, the idea of you laughing and getting attacked, that is Adam Silver's fault because, like you said, he should have been suspended more than 25 games.
Yes, and like again, I'm reading the comments. People say you're an asshole for dancing on his grave. First of all, I never said I was happy that he was injured. I was just waving him off goodbye for the season because he got hurt and he should have been suspended a lot more. That's really what I was doing. If people want to misconceive the message I put out there, that's on them. But John Morant has life problems. Now he's got injury problems. And a torn labrum is not easy to come back from either.
No.
So people need to realize, and I don't think once I said he was a bad player. I always said he was a good player. He should be the face of the NBA currently. But with all the gun incidents, and then when he scored the basket and he did the finger, like, how stupid can you be? Like, you were suspended for that. And you do that. And I think he claimed ignorance afterwards. Like, he tried to say, like, "Oh, I didn't Yes, you did.
Realize-
Come on.
Nah, I think it's. Do I think he realized what he did? Probably not, but it was stupid. It was stupid. I won't
But
argue that.
yeah, so that's
we're
pretty much there.
We're not done. We are actually not done. Very small thing. I'd say it's a little small thing because we're not a college sports. We don't really do the college sports too much, at least you and I. Obviously, we have other people here at the network, Nick DiMartino, Liam Barwick, Zan, who follow the college scene a little more. But where's the breaking? Oh, did we already delete the breaking? Oh, there it is. Okay. There it is. Okay. Breaking news, as of at least the time we're recording this. 5-star wide receiver Ryan Williams, who was supposed to commit to Alabama, has now decommitted from Alabama following the retirement of Nick Saban. This comes from Hayes Fawcett.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that pop up. Again, not a surprise. Nick Saban's not there anymore. Why would you want to go there? That's no fault of the organization itself. I mean,
right, but it is going to be very interesting to see what happens next with Alabama football in an era without Nick Saban.
Well, they are going to have their choice of who they want, coach-wise, but that coach is not going to be Nick Saban, who knows that town, knows that community, knows what needs to be done in Alabama football. Does Dabo Sweeney, who is one of the rumor guys, know Alabama football? Against Alabama football, but not Alabama football.
Right.
So
it's one thing to be in the visitor locker room against Alabama. It's one thing to be in the home locker room and know that system inside and out.
I don't know if this is a bad example, but Joe Torre as the Yankee manager for many years. Who took over for Torre when he left?
Girardi.
It was Girardi. Girardi was okay, but he was no Joe Torre, from understanding the town. Even though he was a Yankee in the 90s.
I was gonna say, that one's not. Those aren't great examples because Girardi and Boone were Yankees in the Torre system. So I don't know.
But I'm just talking about in general, just being in the atmosphere.
Actually, I would actually say Torre himself might be an example of somebody who had there were a lot of questions when he got hired after Buck Walter left the team after 95, leading them back to the playoffs for the first time in 13-14 season, and then bringing in Torre, who didn't have a lot of great managerial success. And then there are all those questions. I remember the headlines were saying Joe who, and then of course Joe goes on to win 4 of the next 5 World Series with the Yankees, and it wasn't Joe who anymore.
Well, I'll give you another one. Bobby Cox with the Braves. 20 years with an organization. It doesn't happen. You don't see that anymore.
Right.
You don't see long tenures.
And those kind of reigns have some big shoes to fill. Like we just talked about earlier with Belichick as well. He's in that situation.
That's a good example right there. Belichick.
If he leaves, regardless if it's a veteran like Mike Vrabel or somebody from a coordinator stepping up, those are going to be some big shoes to fill, especially with a weak Patriots team.
I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be a young coach. I'm going to tell you that right now, because you're not going to go from a Bill Belichick experience, winning 7 rings, to someone who has no experience. It's just not going to happen. The fans will riot if a rookie coach comes in here because they're so used to winning.
Fair enough. All right. Little packed episode, but that's finally going to do it after all the Black Monday mess, after all the McAfee mess, all the RELAX mess. So that does it for episode 215. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media, Facebook, Twitter, aka X, Instagram at ETB Sports, Facebook, X, aka Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for ETB Network at ETB Network. YouTube.com/ETB Network is our base home, just past 600. I saw the devil's number pop up, Nick 666 in subscribers. I think that needs to change a little soon.
Yeah, I hope that's not bad luck for the next couple weeks, but we'll see.
So make sure to subscribe as we're on the road to 700 and obviously the big goal of 1,000. And then Don't forget to listen to us on our audio-only platforms, including Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Or if you are listening on those audio-only platforms, make sure to come up to our YouTube home, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Go to etbpodcast.com for more content, including more information about the network, some of our past blogs that have been happening. And then make sure to follow myself and Nick Morgasen on our own personal social medias. And Radio for Nick, at Thomas J. Albano for myself. And yeah, that's going to do it. So for Nick Morgasen on Albano, we'll see you next week for another edition of Empty the Bench. Take care, all.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.